All right, we're here with Mary Hamilton from Mad Data. Tell us a little bit about your company.
Well, we are obviously like a husband and wife team, and we started it in 2004. And like Brian's like most techs, right? Like that start the company. They're doing everything. They're trying to do the marketing. They're trying to do the business work. They're providing the service. So that's how we started, and it was a side gig. And he was a network admin of a law firm. And then over the years, like we kept growing by word of mouth and kept acquiring. And then at some point, I was like, oh God, like you were swamped. Like you need some help, right? So I started helping in the background, helping him, like I think most women, we step in to help with the checkbook, help answer phone calls and set appointments. So we started in that, and then we grew, and then we really got to a place where we weren't really growing anymore. And we knew we needed to change. We knew this was, gosh, you're talking like 14 years in, right? Like this is years of getting through this. And then we get a campaign in the mail with $1 on it. And we were like, what is this? And then I remember Brian, bringing it to me. We talked about it. And I was like, seriously, is this going to work? Right? Like it's a marketing company. And I was like, all right. So then we went through the process, got in with that. And that changed everything for us because we went from, Bryant being overwhelmed with everything, not having we had no MRR. Like,
no MRR.
Like
okay.
it was our version of what managed services was before we actually educated what it was. And we created our own thing. And that was like maybe $1,800 that we would get. Everything else was break, fix, and project work. Then we understood, we were like, there's this concept called monthly recurring revenue, and we can do that.
Right.
So that was the big turning point for us when we actually started this path with Technology Marketing Toolkit. And that's when the big shift happened in our company that I was like, you know what, Brian had no time. He had no time to try to do all this stuff. He did a lot. And then I was like, you know what, let me back you up. Like, let me come in and do it. And I started learning everything. I'm like, I remember him come, my biggest memory is he came in, he gives me this pile of stuff, software, like Infusionsoft and map stuff and just like all these things. And he was like, a PSA tool, like I had no clue.
All the TMT stuff, and just dropped it on you.
Yes, and then like stuff to actually do to do the managed services.
Yeah.
I had no clue. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna learn it. So I learned all of it and then started implementing it. Then I understood it. Then I was able to explain it. Then I started saying, I was like, oh my God, man, this stuff is amazing. And then we started really selling. That was understanding what we had and not making excuses anymore for not being able to do it. That was, I think, the biggest key for us. And I wasn't worried about, we've been doing this now for like 4 years, learning the processes, rinsing and repeating things. And I think everybody feels like they have to have this amazing one campaign that's gonna it's the silver bullet. It's just gonna cure everything.
Right.
And that's not the case. It's like I have imitated what everybody has done. And we're just on the precipice of really innovating new things and finding like, oh God, this works for us. Let's do it this way. Use the process to follow for us. So that's kind of our business in a nutshell and where we've come from.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what got you here, 2022. What kind of results did you get that put you in the Better You Best semifinalists?
Well, we came back from last year and we just were like, we refused. We grew a lot the previous year before, a lot. And I was like, I refuse to be a one-hit wonder, for real. So we came back, we brainstormed, and we really focused on doing, like we did the aspirin campaign. We followed the simple processes.
Yep.
That was one of the things to really start creating a list to market to. And we're still like doing drip campaign stuff. We're doing follow-up. I think people underestimate the power of a follow-up.
Okay.
Last year we focused on doing events and trade shows and joint ventures and referrals. Like I think if anything changed the business in the last year, it was referrals and the joint ventures. Getting with the right people and then asking one question. This was, like I'm going through meeting, like doing our standard stuff, TBRs, QBRs, meeting with our clients. And I was like, you know what? Let me ask one question. Let's see how far we can go with this referral thing. And I was like, is there anybody, I always start with, can I ask you a dumb question or like a ridiculous question? And they always go, absolutely, like, what is it? It's like a no-brainer. And then I'm like, is there anyone you could possibly refer us to? And they're like, yeah, let me think about it. And that started opening up doors to follow up with them. That was one of the biggest things last year, doing the events and then again, following the process to market for the events, and then the process afterwards was following up with everybody. And that's led to project work, and it's led to new MRR, and led to us continuing to grow, I think, amazing in the last year.
Awesome. So a lot of people hear this and then they're like, well, I don't have the time for that, or I'm not sure how to implement. What did you do to overcome those things? How did you make the time? How did you find the time? How did your organization tackle that implementation challenge of, okay, that sounds good, or I have all the materials, but what do I do now?
Yeah. I think for us, it was priorities, right? Like, you got to come back, and we always get a lot from anytime we come to these events. And I was just talking to two ladies, Aubrey and Michelle, in the hallway downstairs, and they're like, now I got to go back and implement 50 things. And if there was anything that people in the beginning were like, pick one thing and work on it. So last year we were like, okay, what do we want to focus on? And it was building a list and following up. So for us, time, it was, and last year we changed our tool set. We went from one vendor to another vendor. We outsourced our financial stuff. We moved from Roanoke, Virginia to Dallas, Texas. So I'm like, there was a lot of shifting going on last year, but in the midst of that, it was our priority was to get a list. So if you don't have time, if you're overwhelmed with it, you got to figure out what is the most important thing for you to accomplish that you will actually do and follow through with. And that was how I feel like we had time, because when you're in the midst of like storm and chaos and change and transition, it's easy to be like, you're pulled everywhere. But if you know what you want and you have one singular focus, then you keep going back to that. And then everything else just kind of falls into place.
So if you had some advice for somebody watching this who either is just getting started with their business, or like you, they have a business but they want to have a breakthrough, they want to stop doing the same old thing, what's your advice to people out there who are trying to break through or trying to get started on the right foot?
I think they need to find what you want to do, right? Like, don't be afraid to imitate. I think we get so hung up on ourselves that we feel the pressure to have to create something new, reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about this is they've done the work for you.
Sure.
And there's no shame in trying to figure that out and start with the foundational things, because if you don't know what a list is, I think when anybody comes into this, you need to understand like who your clients are going to be, how are you going to get their attention, and how are you going to follow up with them. And having a very simple like mindset about it, instead of feeling again like we have to reinvent the wheel, we have to do something amazing and breakthrough. Just take the time and simplify it and do one thing at a time. It always comes back to just little baby steps.
Yeah.
And then that'll eventually, I think, lead to the breakthrough. It'll take time, but it's like that dam, like the little holes that start coming in. So as you start working in your business, working in your family, working in all that stuff to clear out the white noise, and the little holes start, and you're like, oh, there's actually like, there's leads coming in. Like you never had that before. When you start getting those rewards, then that drives you to continue to the success so that you'll have your breakthrough eventually.
So we're doing 12 of these interviews. There's 12 semifinalists. There's only one woman in the group, and it's you.
Yep.
Anything you want to say to the ladies out there who are in tech, the ladies who are out there working in the MSPs or running the MSPs? There's certainly not as many as the guys. Any advice on what you've learned in the process or how you've been able to be successful in that situation? Anything you'd tell them?
Yeah, women come up to me all the time, and the one thing that they say is, I'm so intimidated of walking into a room with men in the industry. I don't feel confident enough. And so they're always like, how are you so confident? And, years ago, probably like 3 years ago, I had a conversation with Robin, and this was a pivotal moment for me as a woman, because I was overwhelmed. I was like, I think a lot of women helping their husband in the business, and they are great, like we're great supporters, right? Like we'll clean up all the mess and we'll help keep it functioning. And I was so intimidated to step up, because for me, if I'm just being honest, like I was really afraid of losing my kids. Like what would that mean? What was the cost associated with really stepping up in the business? And when I expressed that to Robin, she told me, I was like, I'm just not confident. And she was like, you have to be competent to be confident.
Yeah.
And so understanding what I was doing helped me to be like, okay, I can have these conversations, right? So I think all the women in there, we get intimidated by a world that we don't truly understand. And so the more you can understand what you're doing, and then honestly just get rid of the white noise in our head, because we are our biggest enemies.
Yeah.
Every time, every woman I've talked to, you know, I'm just like, just there's no affirmation I think you can say. You just really have to put yourself out there, and then trust. If you've had babies, you can help run a company. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are bigger things in life that we've done, and I that's not to ever diminish men. I love working with my husband and having that support, but going from a stay-at-home mom to running the company, and that's been a whole transition in of itself. So I'm like, you know, if I had the biggest insecurity I feel, because I couldn't even look at people in the eye when I started in this. I couldn't walk in. I was always like head down. And now I can walk into the room and I can look at people in the eye and I can talk with them. And I'm like, you know, it's kind of cheesy, but I'm proud of that. So I think women, if practical advice, hold your head up, look people in the eye, hold your shoulders back, right? And start learning. Don't be afraid. Because I'm like, if I can do it as like a weird stay-at-home mom with like 5 kids, then there is, in my opinion, nobody that cannot do it.
I love it. So you got to have competence to have the confidence.
Yes.
I love it. Thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you, Dave.